All right, so Conan, our journey through the original Conan mythos takes us here to the third Conan story ever penned by Robert E. Howard in the 30s. What a ride. And I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm doing this exploration not in chronological order of publication because some of Howard's stories were not published in his lifetime. Case in point, this one, the Frost Giant's Daughter, which I covered in the previous episode, plus various other stories that I'll cover at some point. Now, I'm more interested in how the character Conan developed and grew in his creator's mind. And the best way to do this is to read these stories in the chronological order in which Mr. Howard conceived them. And to the best of my knowledge, after writing his very first Conan, the Phoenix on the Sword, and the Frost Giant's Daughter, this is the third Conan adventure he ever wrote. Until someone proves me wrong. But in order to do that, to explore how Conan developed in Robert E. Howard's creative mind, we need to turn to Robert's original manuscript, which, even though it was initially written in March 1932, the general public didn't get to read The God in the Ball until September 1952. And even that version was re-edited, manipulated, reworded by L. Sprague de Camp. So, no. Okay, let's proceed in order. And first of all, welcome, dear listener, to the incoherent ramblings of a mad person online. We leaf through the pages of Conan as his creator conceived him on the page. So how did this story come to be? Well, first of all, we know from Blood and Thunder, the Robert E. Howard's biography written by Mark Finn, we know from Blood and Thunder that Howard wrote The God in the Ball and submitted it to the pulp magazine Weird Tales in 1932. And I don't mean pulp, in any derogative sense, by the way, because some of the authors we nowadays regard with a little more respect than their contemporaries did, had their stories published on Weird Tales. H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Bloch, who would later go on to write the novel that would become Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 movie. Not to mention those horror episodes of Star Trek original, the original series. Those Star Trek episodes we just love to chuck on screen on Halloween. No, you don't? Just me? All right. Anyway, so Ray Bradbury, for example, had his stories published on Weird Tales, even Tennessee Williams, apparently. And while Weird Tales did publish Howard's first Conan story, The Phoenix on the Sword, they rejected his second one, The Frost Giant's Daughter, and this one. So the manuscript for The God in the Ball stayed safely tucked away in a drawer. I like to think it was a drawer, because why wouldn't it be a drawer? Anyway, manuscript stayed safely tucked away in a drawer until it was discovered by L. Sprague de Camp in 1951. Do you know what? I think this is the first episode where I actually mention L. Sprague de Camp. All right, so real quick, because there will be a playlist dedicated to the man at some point. Fear not. L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter together in the same playlist, maybe. I fancy that. But real quick for now, first acknowledgement, we are indebted to Lion Sprague de Camp because he popularized and spread those Conan stories, which we probably wouldn't have today if it wasn't for him. Certainly not as the juggernaut, phenomenon that Conan has become through the decades. but on the other hand, he did re-edit the source material, fit his own vision. And I know that a lot of fans are unhappy with what L. Sprague did with Robert E.'s work. Anyway, as I said, there will be a section dedicated to him and Lynn Carter. So yeah, The God in the Ball, edited by De Camp, appeared in September 1952 in Space Science Fiction magazine. After that, as far as the book format is concerned, De Camp then published a whole series of Conan story collections. Conan the Conqueror in 1950, The Sword of Conan in 1952, The Coming of Conan, and King Conan in 1953. I'm reading here. I don't I don't have them all memorized. Conan the Barbarian in 1954, Tales of Conan in 1955, and eventually The Return of Conan in 1957, the full-size novel. And these were the gnome press editions. This story, The God in the Ball, rather, appeared in The Coming of Conan in 1953, and then it had an afterlife in various other publications like the Lancer books, which was in 1967, and then Grant Publishers, 1975. But to finally have the original words of Robert E. Howard, The God in the Ball, as Robert actually wrote it, without Lion Sprague's alterations, the general public would have to wait until the year 2000, when Howard's original stories appeared in the 2-volume Gollang's edition, the one I happen to own. Conan scholar Michael K. Vaughan calls these two Gollang's books, the fantasy masterworks, in his video titled The Best Editions of Conan by Robert E. Howard. But he calls them that because the edition he shows in that video happened to have the subtitle Fantasy Masterworks on the cover, whereas in the copy I own, the caption in the same spot on the front page or the front cover, the caption actually says The Conan Chronicles Volume 1, The People of the Black Circle, and Volume 2, The Hour of the Dragon, respectively. But yeah, I think we're essentially talking about the same books. Paperback, by the way, I own the paperback edition, not unfortunately those amazing black hardcover Gollangs, the ones. But yeah, these two Gollang's books are essentially how I was introduced to Conan on the page. I mean, on print. I had already watched the Arnie movies, multiple times, and it must have been the year 2000 or 2001. I remember I just finished rereading The Lord of the Rings in preparation for the Peter Jackson's films, which were about to hit the big screen. I think I told this story before, and that gave me an appetite for more fantasy. So I found myself browsing the shelves of this shop, the Forbidden Planet in Covent Garden, London. For some reason, I did see and dismiss the Wheel of Time series, which was unfinished at the time. Winter's Heart had just been published. And to be honest, I don't remember if I saw the Game of Thrones, a Song of Ice and Fire saga, because A Storm of Swords was out by then, I guess. I don't remember. Anyway, I guess I wanted to go for something familiar and finished, completed, no cliffhangers. So I remember seeing all those Conan pastiche novels lying around on the shelves, all written by different authors, and being quite the purist, I will have you know. I demanded to know who first came up with the idea, the concept, the character Conan. And the fella behind the counter, I was like, oh, you lucky bastard. Listen, yeah, you haven't got a clue. Okay, I can't swear that the guy sounded exactly like that, all right? We will dispense with the accents. He said, yeah, you have no idea how lucky you are, mate. These 2 volumes of Robert E. Howard's collected Conan stories having literally just come out, yeah? The Gollang's edition, here. We real Conan fans had to wait for decades to get the Conan stories the way Robert actually wrote them. And you just waltz into my store going, "Oh, do you know what? I fancy reading the original Conan stories. Point me in the right direction, my good man." So there, now you have my origin story as well. All right, so be it as it may, I'm not going to linger on what other editions came out later, Wandering Star, Del Rey, Thor. That's not what this commentary is about. My point was that Robert E. Howard wrote this story in 1932, and it took readers 68 years to get to read it in the author's original words. The God in the Bowl appeared in volume 1 of those Gollang's fantasy masterworks, by the way. That's when it hit the public again. No, actually, ever, because as I said, the original manuscript had never been published, really, original, commercially. But just to be pedantically specific, it appeared in volume 1, titled The Conan Chronicles, volume 1, The People of the Black Circle. Gollang's Editions, aka Fantasy Masterworks. So now that we have Robert E. Howard's original words, long premise, what say you? Shall we sink our teeth into the third Conan story Monsieur Howard ever wrote? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. The God in the Bowl. There be spoilers ahead. And right off the bat, the first scene opens on a dead body. Dun dun dun. We're in a museum. There's the dead body of the museum curator lying there, sprawled in the middle of one of the museum halls. It's kind of like the Da Vinci Code, except we don't have a character saying things like, "I've got to get to a library and fast." Because all the Da Vinci Code. What a turkey of a movie. "I've got to queue at the librarian's desk and fill in an application form for the library membership and fast. Dun, dun, dun. Clock is ticking." No, but really, okay, so there are other substantial differences between this story and the Da Vinci Code. Like, it's not the museum curator, first of all, but proprietor, owner. His name, Callian Publico. He owns, or used to own, the most amazing collection of precious antiques, precious artifacts from all over the world, all stored right here in this museum in the town of Nomalia, in the kingdom of Numidia. Numidia. Having written the essay, the Iborian Age, where the geography and history of the continent inhabited by Conan is explained in detail. Robert E. Howard now proceeds to use the map of this world to set his adventures on, in specific geographic locations. First Aquilonia, then Nordheim in the Frost Giant's Daughter, and now Numidia. And it makes sense that something like Callian Publico's temple, that's what the museum is known as, by the locals. It makes sense that something like Callian Publico's temple should be in Numidia, because Numidians seem obsessed with preserving ancient history. We keep hearing about the Numidian chronicles and so on and so forth. But Callian Publico, it's never mentioned, but we're given to understand that Callian Publico didn't exactly open his humongous collection to the public out of scholarly love, for history, because he's never described as this humanitarian, philanthropic, sort of character. No, it's more likely that he opened his collection to the public for a price, the price of an admission ticket. And now he's dead. On this night, he met his tragic fate. He died because he messed with things he shouldn't have been messing with. In the words of Nancy Sinatra, these boots are made for walking. You've been lying when you should have been truthing. I like that line. Now, okay, so he's found lying there on the floor by the watchman. The museum's has got a night watchman, sort of like a museum night guard. sort of like a Ben Stiller character in A Night at the Museum. You know, I'm allowed to picture him as Ben Stiller, aren't I? No, but his name is actually Aros, of course, Aros, which I imagine must be a common name in the media, because there's another Aros mentioned in the Hyborian Age, the pseudo essay, historical essay. The Aros was apparently some dude in Numidian history, some dude, priest of the cult of Mitra, at some point took the weird decision to enter the Pictish wilderness alone and unarmed, and introduce the savage Picts to civilization and the gentle worship of the god Mitra. But this is a different tale. This is a different Aros as well, indeed. And this Aros, right now, the night guard, is gaping at the sight of Callian Publico, lying dead on the floor. Yeah, let me read you the quote. I got it right here. Like a disintegrated ton of fat, his rich robe half torn from him, and his purple tunic awry. His face was blackened, his eyes almost starting from his head, and his tongue lolled blackly from his gaping mouth, because he had been strangled. His fat hands were thrown out as in a gesture of curious futility. On the thick fingers, gems glittered. Okay, that was a crap reading, I'll concede. But that's right, his rings weren't stolen because he was not robbed. He was strangled by a mythical creature. Might as well tell you now, if you have read the story. I hope you have, because I told you I was going to spoil the hell out of it. He was, this Callian Publico, museum owner, was strangled by a mythical creature with the body of a serpent, python, boa constrictor, that sort of thing. There, I said it. So it's out of the way. Of course, in classic Lovecraftian style, we'll find out that this serpent guy is the sort of creature that no sane eyes should ever behold, but we'll get to that. Because right now, it's not the actual murderer that Aros sees, but someone who might be in danger of being framed for the murder. That's right. It's our friend Conan the Cimmerian. There he is, casually walking into the room. Oh, hello, hi. Then he's described as wearing nothing but a loincloth. Oh, the loincloth. It makes its first appearance here, as documented. The God in the Bowl. I'm so fond of that loincloth. I remember when I read these Conan stories on these two Gollang's Fantasy Masterworks books for the first time. At some point I had a sort of drinking game before reading each new story. If the loincloth was mentioned, I'd pour myself a shot. Tequila. I think it was black tequila. Black Death tequila. You know the brand with a skull on the label, because of course. Oh, and naturally the rest of the description is there, naked but for that loincloth and sandals, a black maid of hair, steely blue eyes, and listen to this, a long sword hanging at a leather scabbard on his girdle. At his girdle. Which, really? Long sword? Later we find out that Conan came in here in the museum with the intent of stealing some Zamorian diamond goblet, which means that he came into the museum as a burglar, not as a warrior, not expecting open combat, you know what I mean? Even if he did expect some kind of confrontation with, say, a museum guard like Aros, like right now, surely a short sword would have been better, or maybe not even. How about a dagger? The ideal weapon, for creeping in the shadows, grabbing the guard from behind and slit, the classic trope. But a long sword, a bit impractical, don't you think? Especially when you think that Conan scaled a wall to get into the museum and then entered the building via a trapdoor on the roof, all the while with a long sword dangling, not even on his back, but on his girdle. I don't know. I know that the long sword will come in handy toward the end of the story. Also, Conan used it to break in that trapdoor, the padlock, whatever. But any other burglary utensils, would have done the trick. No? I don't know, dear listener. What do you think? What do you think? So anyway, Arrows has no doubts. Conan is a foreigner and is surely the murderer. Bloody foreigners walking into museums outside opening hours, murdering owners of said museums. The country is going to the dogs, I tell you. So Arrows is all like, "Oh, you did this, didn't you, barbarian?" Arrows immediately jumps to conclusions. But Conan is all like, "No, no, 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 see, no, I didn't." Arrows doesn't waste a second. And he sounds the alarm. It's a sort of a velvet rope that you're supposed to pull, and it rings a bell outside in the street, which is supposed to summon the night patrol. And Conan goes, "Oh, you fool! You're going to summon the night guard." See, right now, Conan thinks Arrows is just another burglar, come here to steal the same artifact. But sure enough, the Nomalian police arrive on the scene, and we're introduced to another bunch of characters, the cops, who are wearing their scarlet tunic, uniform type thing, and they're armed with bills, it says here, which are sort of like agricultural trimming implements, but with a spike on one side and a hook on the other, so they can be used as weapons. There also happens to be the prefect of the city police with them for some reason, some guy called Dionys, and he's not a very nice guy. And there's also none other than Demetrio, the chief of the inquisitorial council of the city of Numalia. See all these names, right? I mean, Numidia is kind of like a stand-in for ancient Greece, I think. But the names that actually baffle Conan are all those titles, prefect, head inquisitor. Yeah, mate, this is Conan, yeah, mate? I don't know what you guys actually do for a living. I'm unfamiliar with your bureaucracy, and I couldn't care less. Right now, my job description is simply burglar. Yeah, not murderer, just burglar. But you can call me Conan, the Cimmerian, all right? Yeah. Okay, this is probably a good time to inform you that these dialogues are slightly paraphrased. But Demetrio, the Inquisitor, he's all like, "Yeah, well, if you're not the murderer, you've got to prove it. Burden of proof is on you, mate. Guilty until proven innocent and all that. That's how our justice system works around here, barbarian." And who's the stiff anyway? Oh my God! In fact, oh my Mitra! Why, it's none other than Callian Publico. And the prefect Dionys is all like, "All right, let me beat a confession out of this suspect. I'm known for that sort of thing, Demetrio and Dionys has this bad cop, a slightly less bad cop routine here. And Robert E. Howard, I'm sorry for nitpicking, but yeah, he does give us a bit of an as you know sort of exposition. No text, no story is ever 100% perfect. Because he goes. Look, he does say. Let me read you the quote. This is Arus, the night guard, and he's saying, "That's right. It is indeed. This is indeed the body of the late Callian Publico, and foully murdered. It is my duty to walk about the building steadily at night, because, as you know, there is an immense amount of wealth stored here." All right, never mind. Let's get to the bottom of this mystery, because we're now placing together Callian Publico's whereabouts on the last hour of his life. Of course, it's much easier for us, having read the story, but as usual, first-time readers are taken on this ride of deduction, like, we know that Callian Publico entered the building via a door on the portico earlier tonight. But here, Arus tells us he found the portico door bolted, which you can do from the inside, but without the padlock, which you can only lock from the outside, upon leaving the premises. And only Callion Publico could lock the padlock, because he's the only one with a key to the padlock. And there it is, hanging at his girdle. And Arus hasn't got a clue as to how Callion Publico managed to sneak into the building with him, going round and round the building, given that Publico always travels in his chariot. So why didn't Arus even hear the wheels of on the cobblestones, Surely, if Publico had arrived in the middle of the night, he would have arrived on his chariot, and I would have heard it. But I didn't, he's thinking, so I'm confused. At night, I would have heard it. But you see, we do know that Callion Publico didn't, in fact, arrive from his mansion in the middle of the night, but he was stationed in a house literally next door, waiting for the right moment. He was chilling at Promero's house, as we will find out. Promero is another character that will enter the story. But Dionys, the prefect, is impatient. He goes, why are we wasting time? I say, let's take the barbarian downtown and beat a confession out of him. That's all he wants to do, Dionys. But predictably, Conan goes, yeah, mate, yeah, right. I'd like to see you try. All right, this is Demetrio. What did you come here to steal anyway? And Conan, food? Why does he come up with such a naive lie, which everybody immediately calls him out on? Because Demetrio goes, there isn't a cafeteria in the establishment, even though I've always thought it was a commercially poor idea, not to have a cafeteria, or indeed a gift shop. I kept telling Callion. Yeah, now I don't know why Conan lies about wanting to steal food. I mean, he could have just said, yeah, well, there's a lot of precious stuff here, so, I came in and figured I'd take my pick, evaluating both value and practicality. But no, he doesn't say that. So Demetrio goes, listen, mate, okay, no one here is accusing you of murder, but you have to admit that the circumstances don't exactly, how did you scale that wall to gain access to the roof anyway? Ah, well, that was the easy part, because the wall is decorated with carvings. So as soon as this idiot Arus turned around the corner in one of his rounds, hop, and voila, I was up. Arus, who at the time I thought he was just a fellow, burglar. But I thought, yeah, that's all right. I'm going to outsmart him. But Demetrio is smart, because he realizes that even 3-4 policemen with their agricultural implements and their chief Postumo, we will learn his name. We will learn his name as soon as he speaks a few lines. Even that police squad is no match for the sheer strength of this Cimmerian with a longsword, used to much tougher, existential struggles. And this is a theme that Robert E. Howard will reiterate again and again. So that's basically why Demetrio wants to keep things, amiable, civil, because he knows that the story Conan told is plausible. He has seen Cimmerians climb walls, apparently. Under what circumstances, it's unclear, but yeah, so he said, okay, so you scale that wall, yeah, I buy that. And being smart, Demetrio pieces the pieces together. He goes, all right, Conan, so you came down from the roof, knew where the stairs were, and didn't even bother with any of the valuable exhibits, in the upper floors, must be more than one upper floor, and then you came down here with the intent of stealing a specific object. Clearly, you're no random burglar. No, someone commissioned this theft, huh? Somebody hired you, Cimmerian. Plus, Callion Publico here, he was strangled, mauled and strangled, which I don't get, because you have that long sword. It would have been more practical for you to do the deed with the long sword. And by the way, I wonder if you'd like to hand it to us, maybe, because we are the authorities, the law and order. No, all right. You hold on to it a bit longer. Never mind. Okay, so by my forensic expertise, I reckon the man has been dead for half an hour. He's that good, you know. He's good like that, Demetrio. I reckon the man has been dead half an hour. You know, I'm not chief of the Inquisitorial Council of the city for nothing. He's doing his CSI shit, Demetrio, you know, which means, he continues, this means that if Conan's story of how he got in checks out, well, then he wouldn't have had time to whack Publico, right? Okay, so to summarize, the weapon used to strangle the victim and crash his neck more was probably like a ginormous cable of sorts, and judging by the evidence of stuff knocked down on the floor and whatnot, the assailant must have attacked the man in that room over there. See? That over there? And then the poor fella must have sort of crawled here to die. Yeah, proper inspection, you know, CSI. Which, by the way, we know that's not actually what happened because, first of all, not a cable, but the huge, bulky serpent guy, you know, strangled Callian, then coiled around his body and threw him from the room and into the hole. That's how I interpret it. And just as everyone is about to go and inspect the other room, they're all stopped in their tracks by a noise outside in the street, because that room, you know, is reserved for the grand finale of the story. And the noise they hear is that of Callian Publico's famed chariot, which has just stopped. Look at the coincidence. Just across the road, right in front of the house of a certain guy on Publico's payroll. Promero is his name. Love these names. Promero is Callian Publico's chief clerk. He's accountant, basically, who helps him, you know, dodge taxes and whatnot. So 2 cops are sent out to fetch both the charioteer and Promero, who looks timid and cowardly. You know, Robert E. Howard immediately tells us it's a typical trait of people like Promero, you know, mousy clerks, former artisans, you know, weaklings, basically. That's how we saw the world, with a bit of contempt for those who made a living from exclusively mental work, creativity, because we've got to be a bit creative to find loopholes and dodge taxes, etc. And I don't mean we. I don't dodge taxes, and I find that kind of ironic, you know, this contempt. Sorry, how rude of me. There you go. I find that ironic because when you think about it, I mean, Robert E. Howard's contempt for those who made a living using their brains and imagination, given that that's exactly what he did. And Promero screams about seeing his boss's dead body immediately as soon as he sees, oh, I'm squeamish, oh, I don't like that. Whereas the charioteer, a huge dude named Enaro, he seems unfazed. So Demetrio immediately asks him why. He goes, oh, you don't seem to be as distraught as this other guy. But the charioteer, Enaro, he just goes, yeah, man, well, good riddance, you know. He owned me as a slave, so I didn't exactly love the man to bits, if you know what I mean. Pardon me if I don't mourn. So the story is, we're given 2 more pieces of the puzzle, supplied by both Promero and Enaro. Enaro recounts how he picked Callian Publico from the museum the day before, around tea time, to drive him to his villa, but the dude, Callian, changed his mind about halfway and was really stressed out for some reason. So he ordered Enaro, the charioteer, to make a U-turn and drive him back to the area, but not to the museum, rather to Promero's house, which happens to be just a stone's throw away from the museum. And what did he want to do? What did he want to go to Promero's house for? Well, that part of the story is supplied by Promero himself, you know, except not right away. First of all, I should have told you, but I forgot. Upon seeing his employer's dead body on the floor, there it is. I was reading the text here on the page. Promero blurted out, "Oh gosh, darn it, blast it, gee whiz. I knew evil would come of this." Interesting. Letting it slip that he actually knew the purpose of Publico's nightly visit to his own museum. Yeah? And this will come out later. Which is why, when Demetrio asks him, shed some light on the mystery, he seems unconvinced at Promero's vague replies, kind of like, "Oh, nothing, just came to my place as a courtesy visit. He came for a bit of a chat, we discussed business, the weather." Nah. Demetrio was buying none of that. He goes, "Oh, bollocks." He orders Dionysus to find a more persuasive way to make Promero spill the beans. And this is where this guy Postumo enters the scene. He's a nasty piece of work. He's the sergeant of this police squad. Answers directly to Dionysus, who in turn answers directly to Demetrio. I hope it's all the hierarchy structure is clear. But he's a nasty piece of work, this sergeant, Postumo. The sergeant is not his actual rank. This Postumo. We learned that this Postumo, what a charming name, by the way. We learned Postumo. We learned that he's the guy who once, let me read you the quote. I got it right here. He once gouged out a girl's eye in the court of justice because she wouldn't give him information incriminating her lover. What did the judge say about that? I mean, is that slightly unorthodox? See what I mean? The judge didn't even go, "I will have no eyes gouged out in my court." That's Postumo for you, that's the sort of thing he does. If only there was some karmic, outcome in store for this Postumo guy, huh? I mean, if only Conan at some point in this story, say a few pages later, gave this Postumo a taste of his own medicine, eh? Huh? Wink, wink. Yeah, no, but right now, given that Promero is not very good at confrontations, you're such a beta, Promero. As soon as Postumo half threatens him, demanding the truth, also slapping him a couple of times, kicking him while he's on the floor for good measure. Holy shit, really? Chill, man. But that's where Promero goes, all right. And he tells us the whole story. All the while, by the way, Demetrio is looking at Conan going, you see, this is how we deal with uncooperative persons. Except that Conan is unimpressed. Yeah, he goes, that sort of procedure, if you can call it that, might work with fools and weaklings, but I'm of sterner stuff, and I've got this longsword still. So there. So anyway, Promero, being a mild-mannered, meek guy, to put it more politely, than Conan, he doesn't hesitate to give us the full account. Besides, let's face it, Promero did say he swore to Publico not to reveal the reason why the latter snuck into his own museum at night. But I mean, let's face it, the dude is dead. Callian Publico is dead. Surely, doesn't that release Promero of his oath? Anyway, so here he goes. The story begins with, drum roll, Thoth-Amon. Dun dun dun, that's right. Now, you remember Thoth-Amon, right? Evil sorcerer from Stygia, not to mention priest to the evil cult of the snake god Set. We met him in our very first Conan story, The Phoenix on the Sword. Except that The Phoenix on the Sword is a story that takes place in the future from the story we're reading right now. With Conan sitting on the throne of Aquilonia. And there, we met an older, in the Phoenix on the Sword, we met an older Thoth-Amon who had just regained possession of his precious ring, from which he derived most of his power. Before that, when he couldn't find that ring, which had been stolen from him, he had been spending decades as a low-power evil sorcerer, a low-calorie, sugar-free evil sorcerer. He was the margarine of evil sorcerers, basically. Dr. Evil. Austin Powers. Never mind. Yeah, I'm sure you caught that reference. But this story, this is technically a prequel to The Sword of the Phoenix. This is a Thothemon in full form, badass sorcerer. And the story goes that Thothemon, out of generosity of his good heart, had decided to send a gift to some Nemedia-based priest of a different cult, a priest of the god Ibis, the god of middle-range hotels. This priest of Ibis being a guy called Calantes, based in a city called Hanumar, not too far from Numelia, and still in Nemedia. And little aside, Thothemon is kind of like the reason why I chose the thumbnail for this video. It's from the cover of the Dark Horse Conan comics issue titled The God in the Bowl, because in the background of Conan fighting a scaled monster, you see Thothemon's, humongous mug, sort of like signifying that the dude is behind it all, Now, to be clear, Promero isn't actually privy to any of that info. No one is at this point of the story. I mean, the fact that this so-called gift comes from Thothemon is revealed later. All Promero tells us right now is this. There was this mysterious caravan carrying an equally mysterious object. Address, care of Calantes. Temple of Ibis, Haruman. You can't miss it. No need for a zip code, postcode, none. Sender, unknown. Yeah, but at some point, the guy in charge of the caravan transporting this gift, what do you call those? Caravaneers? Yeah, let me see. The master of the caravan. That's what he's called on the page. That's it. So that's what we're going to call him. Doesn't have a name. Okay, so the master of the caravan, Robert E. Howard didn't give him a name. I mean, I'm sure he does, but he's a bit of a dodgy fellow, He went to his crew. Tell you what, yeah, we've got another rendezvous in Aquilonia later on, and those guys in Aquilonia are also going to reward us handsomely, huh? Except if we actually do stop at Haruman, in Haruman, and deliver this gift thingy, we're going to waste the whole day. Time is money, you know what I mean? So tell you what we'll do, yeah? Let's make a quick detour to Numelia. Drop the bloody thing with a guy I know. He'll take care of it. You know the guy, Callion Publico? Smashing bloke, yeah. Yes, so then it's straight off to Aquilonia just in time for aperitifs. What do you say, huh? Which, as plausible as it sounds, I don't know, this story is making me doubt the accuracy of this map of Hyboria, which I'm using here as a sort of like a screensaver on YouTube anyway. See, it's a shame because it's a fantastic map drawn by Tony Edwards for the official handbook of the Conan universe, which first came out in 1986. But if you look, I mean, if you were driving your caravan from Stygia bound for Aquilonia, as well you might, anywhere in Aquilonia, you see that according to this map, Haruman very much does lie on the way, more so than Numelia, actually. So what do you think, dear listener? Anyway, be it as it may, what is this gift anyway? This Promero is very well aware of that part, so he tells us. Let me read you the quote. He goes, "Oh, it's a sort of a sarcophagus, such as is found in ancient Stygian tombs, as you know. But this one is round, like a covered metal bowl. Its composition is something like copper, but much harder, and it's carved with hieroglyphs, like those found on the more ancient menhirs in southern Stygia. I must say, this Promero guy, he's been around for an underpaid mousy clerk. Around the continent, I mean. I guess that cooking the books for Calian Publico must have paid off handsomely if he could afford all those holidays to archaeological sites all around Iboria. So that's the bowl anyway, the titular bowl. So if you're expecting a salad bowl, you'll be disappointed. It's not a bowl designed to serve salad in. It's a god bowl, the sort of bowl gods are served in. Supposedly, it was a priceless relic, found among the tombs far beneath the pyramids and sent to Calanthes by an unknown admirer, which we know was Totemon. So as Promero tells us, trusting Calian Publico to actually deliver this priceless relic to Calanthes was a bad idea. Because Calian immediately went, relic my ass, I know what's inside the bowl. It must be the diadem of the giant kings, of the people who used to dwell in that dark land before the ancestors of the Stygians came here. The diadem worn by the Monster Kings. The Monster Kings, gotta love that moniker. And it's if that's the case, this is still Calian Publico, talking to Promero in the flashback. If that's the case, that diadem belongs in a museum. See, he was doing the Indiana Jones thing here, except that he meant his own museum. I don't know how he immediately reached the conclusion that it must be a diadem. Why that and not? It could have been like anything. No, surely it can only be. Well, and how big is it anyway? Oh yeah, well I suppose pretty big if these monster kings were like huge people, huge guys. So anyway, so he would. So the caravan guys dropped the bowl in the museum. And all right, so where do you want it? Here, yeah, all right. And then they shagged off to Aquilonia. But that's another story. That is another tale. Yeah, that's you get that what I did there. See what I did there. It's the ending of Conan, the Barbarian, 1982 film. Anyway, sorry, and then Calian Publico hopped into his chariot bound to his villa, only to change his mind, as Enaro told us, the charioteer. Tell the guy, all right, dude, make a U-turn. Drop me a Promero's cozy apartment. Convenient location, because it's in the same street where the museum is located, you see. And he told him to pick him up again around midnight. His plan being to sneak back into the museum, open the bowl, hide the diadem, and then get back to Promero's and sit tightly until his chariot arrived to pick him up. Now, all of that went as planned, except the last part, where Publico was supposed to come out of the museum and head back to Promero for a nightcap, because he never did come out. He died, actually, as we all know. But Promero gives us other details, like the next day he was planning to claim the burglars had broken into the museum and stolen the bowl, and also framed the night guard Arus for the theft. Upon hearing that, Arus has a bit of a, oh well, oh la-di-da, how about that? Kind of a moment. But I personally don't get it. I mean, why didn't he decide to simply open the bowl, nick whatever was inside, put the lid back, and then have it delivered to the priest Guy Calanthes, I mean, who could be in a position to complain? Anyone coming back to have a word with Calian Publico about the missing content, he could have just said, yeah, well, look, mate, don't look at me. I delivered a bowl exactly in the same conditions as it was given to me. If you ask me, have a chat with your courier, talk about a dodgy fella. He was paid to deliver the thing to Calanthes, and instead he dropped it at my establishment, so he could make another pickup somewhere else. If he lied and cheated about that, what else did he lie and cheat about? You guys have chosen an unreliable delivery company, I tell you. You should have those guys. You should give those guys like a poor rating online. Not come and pester me. I am a respected museum owner, and therefore have zero interest in ancient artifacts. Okay, I see. I think I just spotted a flaw in my own reasoning. Yeah, Callian Publico wasn't exactly above suspicion. All right, so, okay, so burglars it is then. Yeah, he did think it through. Except that no, Callian Publico never got to blame burglars for his misdeeds because he met his tragic fate at the hands. Oh, I can't really say hands. Muscles, yeah, slimy at the slimy, wiggly, scaly muscles of the demigod from Stygia. But Demetrio doesn't know all that yet, nor does anyone else. So he keeps asking questions. He goes, okay, mate, first of all, yeah, there's a plot hole in your story, Promero boy. Why would anyone from Stygia, of all places, a region that is all about the cult of the serpent god, Set, religious zealots who are all about the worship of massive, elongated, limbless reptiles, and who have nothing but hostility against the mild cult of Ibis that we have around here, peacefully coexisting with the cult of Mitra. I don't know exactly what relationship exists between those two other religions, but why would anyone from Stygia send a gift to Calantes, priest of the cult of Ibis? Those two guys, those two, shall we say, classes of priests have always hated each other's guts. Something doesn't add up here. Something fishy here. All right, Promero, show us this sarcophagus. Promero's all like, you really want to see it? Yeah. So Promero leads the way, and everybody follows. Even Conan, more out of curiosity than anything else. He walks, cool as a cucumber. They all file into the chamber where the bowl still is, and it's open. The seals have been broken with a scalpel chisel type thing by Callian Publico, obviously. And in Demetrio's head, the cogs, the gears are spinning. He's all like, aha, surely. He must have decided to grab the content from the bowl, but little did he know that someone was lurking in the shadow, waiting for him to finish the job with his hammer and chisel and then rip him off. Elementary, dear Watson, in the words that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle never actually wrote. Did you know that, by the way, that apparently the words elementary, dear Watson, those three words are nowhere to be seen in the entire Sherlock Holmes corpus. One of those famous misquotes like, played again, Sam, or it's life, Jim, but not as we know it. They're always, the original quotes are always a little bit different. Anyway, the point being that it doesn't occur to Demetrio that Callian Publico might have been killed not so much by someone who was after the content of the bowl, but killed by the content of the bowl. How about that? The bowl, which, by the way, is described thusly. Allow me to read you the quote. A strange black cylinder, nearly 4 feet in height and perhaps 3 feet in diameter, at its widest circumference, which was halfway between the top and bottom. The heavy carven lid lay on the floor, and beside it, a hammer and a chisel. So the bowl is empty, the lid lies next to it. What's going on here? It gets even darker when Promero, by now we know that Promero is the exposition nerd, isn't he? Because he seems to know everything of cultures, uses and customs, religions. He's like the National Geographic here. And he recognizes the markings carved all around the inside of the bowl. Typically the markings of the serpent god Set. You see, he actually goes inside the bowl, even though it stinks in there and it's all like slimy. But he goes, moldy. But he goes farther than that. He goes, this bowl is too old for a human world. It is a relic of the time when Set walked the earth in the form of a man. The race which sprang from his loins laid the bones of their kings away in such cases as these. Perhaps. Okay, so he's not certain. He goes, perhaps. Okay. That's it's quite a jump, just quite a intuition you have there. dear Promero boy, you're wasted as an accountant. Anyway, the infamous, he's talking about the infamous monster kings that were mentioned earlier. But this narrative taps into myths that exist in our world, the gods who mated with humans in unholy intercourses, which gave birth to demigods of sort. You find it in ancient Greek mythology. Hercules was one of the. You find it in the Old Testament, the Nephilim, Genesis 6. Primordial stuff, dear listener. But Demetrio is a rational man, and he dismisses all that. He reckons that the murderer must still be in the museum. He's in flesh and blood, while Dionysus is having a tantrum. I say, let's take Conan downtown and beat the confession out of him. This is his one obsession. It's the one thing he keeps saying throughout the story. Also, he reminds us what penalty might face Conan, because, or rather, Conan might face, because he goes, you go to the mines, not as a tourist, they work you to death. You go to the mines for killing a commoner, you hang for killing a tradesman, and for murdering a rich man, you burn. It's all there, in the penal code. So apparently human rights, not a thing in the media. Some humans are more different than others, you see. And the fact is, Demetrio is already assuming that if the murderer can't be found, well then surely Conan must be the culprit, whether he believes it or not. Because, justice must be served, even though not really. Meanwhile, the guards are searching the whole place, and one of them comes back and goes, oh, look, we've searched everywhere, yeah? The trapdoor on the top floor is smashed in, like the barbarian said, but no one could have escaped from there. It's way too high. And the bolted doors are out of the question, because only Arus and the late Callian Publico had the keys to those bolts. So there you go. No, but listen to what another guard says, because he goes, another one goes, oh, and I found the murder weapon. I mean, found it. I saw it, but I couldn't reach it because it's all the way up there, coiled around the top of a column. It's a bit dark in that room, but I'm sure that's it. We were looking for a super thick cable, and that's what it was, coiled around one of those columns all the way up there. Curiously splotched. What the guard doesn't know is that, he didn't see the murder weapon. In a way, he did. He saw the murderer. And sure enough, when everybody rushes to the dark chamber, the so-called cable is gone. The old trope of, I swear, it was there just a minute ago. I don't know. Does that trope has a name? That trope, I'm calling it that. It was there a minute ago. That's until someone comes up with a better name, better label. And the other guards are all like, everyone is sick and tired of your hallucinations, mate. A cable. Will you stop ingesting those shrooms, especially on duty? And while the guard swears he saw it. No, I saw it, man. I saw it. It was kind of like a cable wrapped around that top of the column right there with the exquisite Doric finishing. It was sort of like a huge cable, curiously splotched. Oh, come on. So where is it now? I don't know. So it's not looking good for Conan right now, because Demetrius are like, I don't believe the barbarian committed the murder, but I suppose we'll have to scapegoat him just the same. So justice is served. That's not how justice works, Demetrio. Anyway, this is where Promero finds out that the bowl was mailed by none other than Thothemon. We know that because we've already read the story. But I told you, he was the exposition geek. That Promero is the exposition geek in this story. See, he's been examining the inside of the bowl and found a recent logo, symbol type thing carved inside the bowl. And it's Thothemon's trademark. But listen, he's right on the money, because he goes, the gods of all times did not die as men died. They fell into long sleeps, and their worshippers lock them in sarcophagi, sarcophaguses, so that no alien hand might break their slumbers. Thothamon sent death to Calanthes. Callian's greed caused him to lose the horror, and is still lurking somewhere near us. Even now, it may be creeping upon us. And, as it often happens, no one is taking him seriously. In fact, Posthumo grabs him and pushes him back into the dark chamber. Go and search that bloody room. If you think we did a sloppy job, huh? There, you find the murderer or the murder weapon or whatever. There, and don't come back until you found something solid, evidence and shit, yeah? Or the murderer. Which is really unfair, because it's not in Promero's job description. I mean, yeah, you guys are the police. What do you want me to to do your job for you? That's what I pay my taxes for. But Promero, as I said, isn't very good at confrontations. So he goes and he stays there in the chamber, in that other room. See, the plot continues to keep the main characters from thoroughly exploring that chamber, because Robert E. Howard is keeping what is really lurking in that chamber for the grand finale. Meanwhile, we're only missing one character now, and there he is, carried inside the museum by one of the guards. One more character, a slender, richly dressed figure, a youth. The guard is all like, I found this guy, yeah? He was slinking about at the back of the temple, so I dragged him here for some questioning. But the prefect is not impressed. Oh, you blundering fool! Can't you see that this is a privileged, powerful and influential young man, who therefore enjoys complete immunity, as prescribed by our extremely fair concept of the law around here? Huh? 1,000 pardons, young master. That idiot didn't recognize you, you know, your charming and not unattractive features. But I do, of course, you being none other than Astrias Petanius, the nephew of our beloved governor. So that's who he is. But Astrias, you know, seems to be cool about it. He just goes, oh, it was quite all right, dear prefect. I was at his late-night vernissage, as you do. Drinking was involved, as it might be, so I decided to walk home to clear my head, as it were. How's my posh? I decided too much wine. I've had way too much wine. How was my posh received pronunciation? It's crap. It's rubbish. I know. Anyway, so Astrias surveys the scene and goes, "Oh, but what have we here? Oh dear, a murder most foul. I see. What an inconvenience." Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but don't let trouble you. Sorry about the mess. Don't let that trouble you, my young sir. The city's safe. We've got the culprit and all. It's this barbarian over here. Conan the Cimmerian says on his passport. Oh my, I say, what a brute. Savage, uncouth. Yuck. How could anyone doubt his guilt? Look at that face. Eyes are too close together. Never seen anything like that. This is still Astrias, in case you didn't. Oh, you've never seen anything like that? Yeah, this is Conan now. You've never seen anything like that? Oh, yes, you have. Yeah, because he's had just enough of Astria's bullshit. Yes, you have, you lying weasel. You bloody well saw me when you hired me to steal the Zamorian goblet. Huh? Rings a bell in that hiding place no one knows about? Say, save 6 people in the world, huh? You dog. What do you about that? Walking off, the wine fumes my ass. You were waiting out there for me to hand you the goblet. See? Now, if you think this plot twist might be a bit, I don't know, predictable, you know, Conan revealing that in fact Astrias was the one who commissioned this theft, Conan's attempted theft. If you saw it coming, well, okay, I don't think it was so overused in the 30s. Okay, first of all. But I do have a couple of comments. Okay, I get that this Astrias guy basically represents everything Conan hates and Robert E. Howard. because he's civilized. And not only that, not only is he civilized, but he's rich and privileged. And not only that, but he pays others like Conan to do the dirty work for him. And not only that, he's also slender. Doesn't even work out, the dude. He's decadent. Conan doesn't like decadent. From these 3 tales we have read so far, we know that much. Conan does not like decadent people at all. And say, okay, granted, I bet that deep inside Conan regrets ending up broke, gambling, debts and whatnot. So he has to resort to accepting gigs from the likes of Astrias. I get that. There's a bit of a resentment there, class struggle and all that. But did he have to blurt out all that without stopping to consider that maybe this was just an act? And eventually this Astrias guy might be able to try and use his political influence to get Conan, his asset, out of trouble. Or then again, I don't just I'm just spitballing around here, but maybe Conan figured, okay, so this dude hired me to commit a theft, and now we're looking at breaking and entering, theft and murder. If I incriminate this Astrias guy, let's see how it pans out. It'll be in his interest to confirm the time I scaled the wall of this place here, which should prove that I couldn't have had enough time to kill the fat guy lying here on the floor. So, who knows? I don't know what went on in Conan's head, because to be honest, I have no idea. But what he must have thought in that split second. But whatever he expected, he sure didn't predict what happens next. Ha ha! Because the head inquisitor of the city, all right, he's all apologetic when he turns to the young nobleman Astrias. He goes, why, but that changes everything. If what our good friend Conan here says is true, my lord, it clears him of the murder, and we can easily hush up the matter of attempted theft. He's due 10 years of hard labor for housebreaking, but, if you say the word, we'll arrange for him to escape, and none but us will ever know anything about it. I understand. Why, you wouldn't be the first young nobleman who had to resort to such things to pay gambling debts and the like. You can rely on our discretion, Oh, and would you like me to make you a cup of tea, while you ponder on the matter, huh? So I added that last line, okay, but still, can you believe that? The amount of scumbaggery the rich and powerful can get away with around here. Networks, nepotism, connections. What do they call it in China? Guanxi, or wasta in Arabic. But no, even in this cushioned, bulletproof position Astria finds himself in, where he wouldn't get arrested if he tried, even then he still won't throw Conan a bone. He just yawns and denies having met him. No, you can torture him, arrest him, I couldn't care less, never seen him before. So that's that. Oh shoot, la-di-da. And that's when, and that's the point when it all happens in like a couple of seconds. Conan, oh no, he's had just enough. He leaps towards Astrias, sword in hand, and literally decapitates him. Ha ha ha! That, dear listener, is why we paid for the admission ticket. Yeah! Shoom, the head flying and rolling on the floor. Conan is moving cat-like, Robert E. Howard informs us, because he's super fast and has to be, because he needs to go for Demetrio next, except he's intercepted by one of those agricultural implements thrown against him by Dionys. So all he can do is just stick his sword into Demetrio's thigh, ouch, and the blade actually comes out from the other side. Not bad. The next passage describes the fight that ensues, and I can't possibly do it justice. I just have to read it to you. The blinding speed of the barbarian paralyzed the senses of the police and made their actions futile gestures. Caught flat-footed, yeah, get it? Because cops, flat-footed. So caught flat-footed and dazed by his quickness and ferocity, half of them would have been down before they had a chance to fight back, except that Posthumo, more by luck than skill, threw his arms about the Cimmerian, pinioning, I love that word, his sword arm. Conan's left hand leaped to the guard's head, and Posthumo fell away and writhed, shrieking on the floor, clutching, here he comes, clutching a gaping red socket where an eye had been. Aha! I told you, karma is a bitch indeed, huh, Posthumo? Next thing Conan does is taking care of Arus, the night guard, who from now on will have to restrict himself to a liquid food diet because I believe, I don't know, mashed peas, I suppose, hummus, that sort of thing. And in the middle of this terrific fight, they all stop in their tracks because a soul-shaking scream coming from the room where Promero had been sent. Oh yeah, that's right, we forgot all about Promero. He's still in the room. He was told to search the room, so I guess he searched the room. What a night. What a busy night. Yeah, so Promero, yeah, had been sent to the naughty room, remember, because he was beginning to be a bit of a pest, you might recall. But that's the same room, as we readers know, that's the same room where the creature that killed Callian Publico is lurking, coiled around marble columns and whatnot. And now Promero comes reeling out of that room. Robert E. Howard writes it twice on the page, He's reeling, he comes reeling out of the room, and he's in a state of shock. He's laughing maniacally like an idiot, and all he manages to say is, "The god has a long neck, ha ha ha, oh, a cursed long neck." At which point he has a seizure and dies. His horoscope did say, try to leave town tonight, yeah? Don't, stay at, I don't know, your sister's? Huh, but did he listen? Did he pay heed? No. But what happens next is kind of comical, because they're all in shock at the sight of Promero, just defunct, bereft of life, simply from gazing upon whatever happens to be in that room. And the only thing they manage to do is run for the door, stumbling on each other, guys at the back screaming, "Wait for me!" I don't know if you've ever watched that Marty Feldman sketch, part of the Marty Feldman show, I think. Anyway, it's about these string budget, coach trips, all included. Arrive at destination, stop for snacks, a bit of sightseeing, stop at a pub, stop for a piss, and every time these stops are over, the footage in the sketch is insanely sped up. Every time each of these stops are over, it always looks like the coach is about to leave without some passengers, leaving some passengers behind. Everybody back on the coach. No, so they all rush aboard. There's invariably some guy yelling, which I think it's Marty Feldman. He's always yelling, "Wait for me, wait for me." It's really funny. If you can find it, just type Marty Feldman coach trip. You'll find it. Anyway, long digression, just to say, imagine these guys, stumbling on each other, rushing to get out in the street, like one of those horror movies, but with Abbott and Costello. Just in a sped-up Marty Feldman sketch. Which, really? You flee the premises? You guys are the police. You're not supposed to flee the premises when some random citizen goes, "Oh, you don't want to go in there." Or at least I'd give it 10 minutes if I were you. But no, they all burst screaming into the street. Even the night patrol, who were surrounding the house, they also joined them. When in doubt, run, But Conan, I told you, Conan is intrigued. He's curious. What's going on here? So he goes into the accursed room to investigate. And right there, over a heavy gilded screen, he sees a face. So you've got to imagine this. Picture this. There's this sort of panel, the kind of panel one would use to get changed behind, I'm told it's called a changing room divider, or simply dressing screen if you're into the old brevity thing. Anyway, the creature that face belongs to is so tall that the head is actually sticking out. Not the rest of the body, just the head. Because Robert E. Howard is saving the rest of the body for his twist finale. So yeah, at this stage, all Conan can see is the creature's head. Let me read you the description. Conan stared in wonder at the cold classic beauty of that countenance, whose like he had never seen among the sons of men. Neither weakness, nor mercy, nor cruelty, nor kindness, nor any other human emotion was in those features. They might have been the marble mask of a god, carved by a master hand, except for the unmistakable life in them, life cold and strange, such as the Cimmerian had never known and could not understand. He thought fleetingly of the marble perfection of the body which the screen concealed. It must be perfect, he thought, since the face was so inhumanly beautiful. Oh la la, hello sailor. No, but seriously, Conan is probably picturing some pale marble figure. I don't know. Think of like Michelangelo's David, or that David-inspired marble statue from the climax of the movie Conan the Destroyer, the statue of the god Dagoth, which does indeed turn into a monster. Spoiler. But yeah, that's what he must have in mind. And at that point, the creature behind the screen beckons Conan. Come over here, big boy. But it's clearly a trap. Yeah. So so Conan springs forward, sword in hand, and swoosh, decapitates. He's decapitating people tonight. Decapitates the demigod behind the panel. Head goes rolling on the floor, much like Astria's head a few minutes earlier. And bada bing, bada boom, the dude is dealt with. The panel starts shaking all over, of course, because convulsions, the dying body behind it. And so that's when Conan finds out that that beautiful head rested not on a regular neck or body, but on the shimmering, headless coils of a gigantic serpent. At which point Conan just goes, I'm getting the hell out of here. And he makes a runner until the spires of Numalia faded into the dawn behind him. And that's how The God in the Ball ends. Now, there's a little controversy here because, as I said earlier, when the character Promero is confronted with that horror, he goes, yeah, the god has a long neck, ha ha ha, or a long, accursed long neck. Now, we know that quote is in the original text by Robert E. Howard, but we also know that L. Sprague de Camp rewrote and edited most of the stories. This one as well. But there are some who actually prefer de Camp's rewrites. Case in point, this very quote by Promero's quote, which was changed into "The God has a very long reach." Yeah, quoting from In Search of Wonder, Essays on Modern Science Fiction by Damon Knight, he writes, I think one passage in The God in the Ball that struck me as unusually fine. Since this is one of the two posthumous stories which de Camp edited for publication, I wrote to de Camp, to ask if it made any changes in the scene that begins with Promero's entrance on page 137. And I learned that he had one word, Promero's last word, which to me makes all the difference between climax and anticlimax. It seems a great pity that de Camp and Howard never collaborated while Howard was alive, because de Camp has been very careful in his recent work to edit the stories as little as possible for fear of making them sound like his rather than Howard's. Okay, all right, that's debatable. But if he'd been on hand when they were being written to put solid ground under Conan's feet and an honest itch on his back, what fantasies might we have not seen then, huh? So yeah, I guess because the long reach, with the long reach sentence, it's revealed that no, the monster god didn't attack Callium Publico in one room, only for the latter to crawl and die in the hole, but rather he strangled Callian, then coiled around his body and threw him from the room into the hole, as I said before. I guess. Whereas with the long neck, all we have is just an aesthetic comment, but not really a hint as to how the murder, panned out. I don't know. I guess that's why this guy, Damon Knight, seemed to like the long reach quote so much. But anyway, so that's, well, you've made it this far. Well done. Good job. No, thank you. Thank you for following me this far. The God in the Bowl. This is how it ends. Robert E. Howard's third Conan story. And, it was a real pleasure talking to you, dear listener. And if you enjoy this sort of content, don't forget to do all the things that people do under normal circumstances. And I look forward to talking to you next. Bye-bye.